Hello, and welcome to the State of Soy. I'm your host, Aaron Putzi. When the Iowa Soybean Association says our customers are real pigs, we mean it. Truth be told, it's not just pigs, but poultry, cattle, sheep, and fish too. Globally, the livestock and poultry sectors are the U.S. soybean farmers' #1 customer, consuming 97% of U.S. soybean meal. Poultry continue to be the single largest domestic user of soybean meal, consuming more than half of all meal. Swine is next, consuming the meal from about 1 of every 3 bushels. Closer to home, Iowa's pig herd consumes more than 150 million bushels of soybeans annually. That's about 27% of the 560 million bushels of soybeans farmers grew in 2018. With soybean prices at 10-year lows, the last thing farmers need is a ding on demand. Yet that's exactly what's occurring with an outbreak of African swine fever in China. Yet there's also positive news, including growth in livestock and poultry production and processing right here in Iowa and in the Midwest. More specifically, a new pork harvesting facility near Belmond and expanded poultry production and processing in western Iowa and eastern Nebraska. Joining us to share their expertise on issues directly impacting soybean demand and prices are Brian Waddingham, Executive Director of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers; Dr. David Pyburn, the National Pork Board's Senior Vice President of Science and Technology; and Lindsey Greiner, President of the Iowa Soybean Association and farmer from Keota. So, David, I want to start with you in this, and you know, making the headlines right in there. There was a lot of concern. The World Pork Expo was canceled as a result. African swine fever. Tell us, what is it?
African swine fever is a severe hemorrhagic virus of pigs. The good news is we've never had it here in the United States. Further good news is it still doesn't exist in this hemisphere. It used to be down on the island of Hispaniola and also down in South America, but it was eradicated from there about 50 years ago, and we have not seen it come back. We don't want to see it come back because this virus is so severe in pigs. Now, I want to make it really clear that the virus is only a virus of pigs. It only infects swine, doesn't infect your pets, doesn't infect people, but when it does infect swine, it usually results in a hemorrhagic death of those pigs.
And in China, which is the world's #1 pork producer, and it's not even close, this has broke. Give us a little bit of the chronology in what's taking place in China, and of course with exports of soybeans so critical from the U.S. to China, any disruption in pig production in that country is going to be felt here at home by soybean farmers. So give us a little bit of an update on the ground.
I would imagine that the soybean market over here is already feeling it because China reported back in August the first reported outbreak of African swine fever in the country. It's probable that it was there before that, on a lot more farms spread throughout a good portion of China. But after that August announcement, what we saw was it started out, the reports came from the northern provinces of China, moved to the south because a lot of those northern pigs move a long ways to the south to go to slaughter, and they were moving that virus as they moved those pigs down to slaughter. But now, as we sit here today, it's across the entire country of China. Almost every province has reported an outbreak, including one of their islands as well has reported an outbreak of African swine fever. I'm judging from what I'm hearing from veterinarians that are over in that country, they're probably underreporting the total number of pigs affected and total number of farms affected. This is something that is going to devastate a good portion of that Chinese industry, and it's something that they're not going to be able to eradicate in short order.
So, Lindsey, you traveled to China a couple of months ago, and we took all the precautions necessary. We didn't visit any farms. We didn't visit any feed mills. We stayed in the urban centers only. But you had a lot of questions when we were visiting with soybean processors and feed mill operators there. What did you come back hearing from those conversations about this disease and how it could impact you as a soybean farmer?
Well, we were trying to get a handle on how big of an impact this disease was having on their hog herd. And we got varying reports, all the way from 13% to 30%. So you sit there and wonder, well, I wonder which one of those is right. I hope it's 13. Even 13% of their hog herd is a big number. You take that to 30, I mean, it's a huge number. It's 1.5 times as many hogs as we raise in this country.
Right.
So we kind of left there not knowing for sure what the real number was, but we knew it was bad. Even on the low end, it was bad. As a soybean farmer, I know we're talking about livestock today, but as a soybean farmer, you think, wow, you talk about piling on. We've got tariffs to deal with, and now we've got a loss of demand. You take 1.5 times the herd that we grow in the United States, and you just eliminate it. They don't need that much bean meal anymore. So that makes negotiations on a trade deal even more difficult.
And we know there's going to be contraction there on the soybean. There just has to be when you see a ding like that in the world's largest hog herd.
And we tried to get an idea of how you depopulate. How soon can you repopulate these farms? Can you get a vaccine? Can you manage it? What are the biosecurity measures you're going to take? They really couldn't answer any of those questions because they just don't know.
So the question now comes to, we know that there is a real challenge there in China because of all of the way they transport pork, the way that the pork production is so immersed throughout the countryside, and we know that China is trying to make their pork operations more efficient and addressing issues like biosecurity. But here at home, Brian, as executive director of an organization that's all about helping farmers grow their livestock herds, have you seen or experienced any increase in the number of calls from hog farmers who, because of maybe what's taking place in other countries, are looking to maybe boost their hog herds here in Iowa?
Well, Aaron, that's a great question. We have seen an uptick in hog calls the month of April, which could be well to do with what's going on in China right now. But we're also seeing an increase in cattle calls, poultry calls, and fish and shrimp calls as well. So it could be a timing issue, or it could be, hey, maybe we need to think ahead here and start banking up some protein because we think there could be a real demand for it down the road.
And as we think about the long-term challenge here, obviously there could be some increased calls and some interest here in the near term, but long term, Dave, what's the prognosis for this disease in China and getting on top of it?
Yeah, Lindsay spoke a little bit to repopulation. We know of farms over there. There are higher, more commercial, more biosecure farms that have depopulated, have gone through disinfection procedures, have tried to repopulate, and they've broken again. So far, I have not heard, as I speak to veterinarians that travel over to China, I have not heard of any farms that were able to clean up, repopulate, and stay negative. So I think long term, this is something they're going to have to battle with. And in addition to individual farms, their individual commercial farms, China has a very large feral swine population. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen reports of it getting into it, but I think we have to assume it's probably in that feral swine population. China also has a very large population of backyard farms that they don't even know exist. And we're hearing that it definitely is in those farms. Those are some of the folks that are maybe moving it from province to province and spot to spot and reinfecting new areas. I think it's going to be a long time before China gets this under control.
Given the importance of livestock production to the soybean farmer, farmers are thinking pretty long and hard here in Iowa about this long term and what the implications could be for their farm.
I'm Dennis Bogards. I'm a farmer from Pella, and as a soybean farmer, I'm looking at the end users of soybeans and swine being a very important one. Wondering if African swine fever came to the United States, what would be the impact of soybean usage in Iowa?
So Dave, your response to Dennis's question.
Yeah, there's different strains of African swine fever that exist. Unfortunately, the strain that is being dealt with by the globe today, whether you're in Eastern Europe, Russia, or China, it's a very severe strain. And we're looking at upwards of 80 to 90% of herd losses due to death from this virus in pigs. So there's no doubt it's going to be a very severe reduction in the need for soybeans. In fact, we had Dr. Dermot Hayes up at Iowa State back in 2011, so we're talking about numbers that are now getting to be 8 years old, we had him take a look at what is the impact on our industry as well as other industries if we were to get African swine fever here. What Dermot found in that study is that in the first year of an infection of African swine fever in the United States, it would be an $8 billion loss for the pork industry. It would be a $3 billion loss for the beef industry. And it doesn't affect cattle, remember. This is all about consumer confidence in meats. And then as far as the corn and soybean losses, corn was looking at a $3 billion loss. Soybeans was estimated to be a $1.5 billion loss because pigs that are gone, pigs that are dead, don't eat.
So as president of the Iowa Soybean Association, Lindsay, and again as someone who's growing soybeans, raising pigs, how do you process that kind of information, and what are you doing to stay positive?
Well, I think you just got to run your business the way we always do. Take the precautions needed. Biosecurity became a bigger deal back when PED was going around, and everybody kind of revisited all the biosecurity measures that we're taking and kind of rededicated ourselves to doing a better job. And I think so from that standpoint, we're not doing a lot of things different from a biosecurity standpoint. Unless you're traveling out of the country, then you take some extra precautions. But it makes farmers nervous. I mean, just to think about it, when you mention numbers like Dave just did from Iowa State, it makes you nervous. But what can you do about it other than do a good job on your farm and take all the biosecurity measures that you can take?
And Brian, at the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, you work very closely with livestock and poultry and fish and cattle farmers, and really encouraging biosecurity. And you know, for those tuning in here today that maybe aren't from a farm, they see those signs at the end of the drive near livestock facilities that have a biosecurity measure posted. Why is it so important that they be heeded?
Well, the biggest issue is you don't know where people are coming from, where they've been. So if they drive onto a farm, maybe they've been to a country that has tested positive for African swine fever, they run a pretty good chance of tracking that disease onto that premise. So we would encourage people, if they see the biosecurity signs, please adhere to them, stay off the premise. A lot of times there's a phone number to call the office manager, and you can get in touch with that person that way. But again, it's all about a good biosecurity plan, have it written down, and have all your employees know what that plan is.
And that message is true for our friends in the media as well. You know, sometimes they want to get out to a farm, capture some video. They may be a little, lazy in terms of looking at those postings and those signage. We've heard about that. So great information for people, especially now, but especially now to be heeding those biosecurity rules. Dave, what are we doing here in this country to safeguard against, heaven forbid, African swine fever breaking here in this country?
Yeah, we're working very hard to prevent that virus from getting here, and we've spoken a little bit about individual farm biosecurity, but every one of us has a role really when you start talking about border biosecurity. This virus moves in meat products. This virus moves in all the excretions from a pig. This virus is very hardy and it survives for a long time. So if you've been out of country, when you come back into country, make sure you're not bringing farm dirty clothes back into the country, farm dirty shoes or boots back into the country. Honestly declare at customs when you're coming in. Don't be bringing any meat products from anywhere that they've got African swine fever or the other foreign animal diseases for that matter. But honestly declare. And Customs and Border Patrol at our ports will help you to make sure you're not bringing in something that could potentially infect our pigs.
Have they sourced the 1 million pounds of pork that arrived here in the United States?
Yeah, they've sourced it back to China. They know who the exporter was in China. And to this point, it didn't move out of the port in Newark is where it was. It has been destroyed. So it never got into circulation here in the United States. But it's those kinds of things. And even on a smaller scale, with e-commerce today and things that you can order from overseas very easily from your own computer, think about where you're ordering these things, especially when you're starting to order things such as meat products from other countries.
And Lindsay, as a pig farmer, there will be someone that needs to step in and fill the lost production that's taking place in China. So not a bad time maybe to be diversified right now and to be raising some pigs.
Well, I think there's going to be some opportunities for pork producers in the United States. I mean, we've already seen that in the futures markets. You know, the tariff issue creates a little bit of problem for getting meat over there because it makes it kind of expensive. And the other hurdle is that they like fresh pork, so they'd have to more or less buy frozen pork from us to make it work. So they would have to adjust their appetite for pork products a little bit to accommodate frozen pork. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity right now for pork producers, and I think it's always been a good thing to be diversified. So, you know, I've had livestock all of my farming career, and probably wouldn't be farming if it wasn't for livestock.
So despite the challenges that are out there posed by African swine fever, there is opportunity for optimism. And Brian, I'd like to start with you. What are you hearing from the field and from farmers interested in growing their livestock or poultry or maybe even their fish farms?
I think Lindsay hit on it earlier. The key word that we've heard the last 2 years is diversification. Livestock still makes a lot of sense. We are seeing some excitement in the hog industry right now. Calls are starting to increase on guys wanting us to come out, site some new barns and buildings. But also we're seeing that throughout the livestock sector. The poultry industry, especially the broiler industry, is growing. We're bringing more cattle back to Iowa, whether it's feedlots or putting cows under roof. And then finally, even on the shrimp and the fish. This is a relatively new area for Iowa, but we think that Iowa could grow a lot of fish and shrimp, and I think being located where we are in the Midwest, that would lend itself well to some of these markets here throughout the Midwest.
So some positive headlines there, and of course the coalition has been really a leader in helping more farmers look at diversifying their farms. And Dave, from the National Pork Board standpoint, what are you seeing out there for interest in expanding the livestock, the pig herd here in the United States? What issues are you studying?
We've, you know, in the last 4 to 5 years, if you look at the number of processing plants that we've seen come on board here in the United States, it's been phenomenal. It's been a time that we've never seen like this before, with new plants that are being built, including the one that's just finishing up here in Iowa. And along with that, we've seen our production expand. But from 2015 to 2017, production expanded by over 12% in our industry. 17 to 18, it was 3%. It's looking like it's going to be 2 to 3% again here, 18 to 19. So we continue to grow as an industry. We're a very vibrant industry. We believe that we're going to continue to grow and increase demand both here and globally for our pork.
And you know, you talk about value-added agriculture. It doesn't get much better than growing soybeans for the pigs, the cattle, the dairy, the fish. I mean, that's value-added agriculture at its best, Lindsay, and that's why the Iowa Soybean Association is really focused on making investments in domestic livestock production.
Well, we have to. I mean, livestock is our biggest, most reliable customer. So that's why we invest in CSIF, Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, the Animal Ag Alliance. You know, livestock is, we're all farmers. Whether we're trying to sell soybeans or hogs or cattle or fish or chicken, corn, we're all farmers. And diversification matters. The livestock is our best customer. So how can we not be involved in that? It's good for everybody. You mentioned value added. Value added is terrific. It creates jobs. That's those kind of things. Livestock production is how you get young people involved in agriculture. And in a state like Iowa, that's so important. We wonder about education, schools, rural infrastructure. We need young families living out on these farms, and that's what livestock does for Iowa.
And it's important to note, too, that in addition to investing in the work of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers, which is all about really going and starting at the ground up on increasing our livestock and poultry herds here in Iowa, it's also working with organizations about increasing consumption and interest in livestock and poultry. And we've done some joint programming. And I know it's very important for consumers to know, too, about the health and safety and nutrition of the products that they're consuming.
Yeah, safety is number one for our producers always. We talked a lot today about African swine fever. African swine fever is not an organism of public health concern. It does not infect people. And over and above that, USDA protects us by not allowing meat from those regions that are positive for African swine fever to come into the country. They're protecting our pigs that way. So we remember, above all, we don't have this virus here. We don't want to bring it in. We're putting most of our efforts into that prevention to keep it out. And if we can do that, it'll be to the benefit of the pork industry as well as the soybean industry.
So, Brian, for farmers who are watching us today, how can they reach out to the coalition if they're thinking about diversifying their farm, or maybe they're raising pigs and would like to raise a few more? How can they reach you?
The best way is to give us a call at 800-932-2436, or they could also visit us at supportfarmers.com to learn more about our services.
And what are some of those services quickly? What can you do for them?
Boil it down into 4 key services. One of them is citing these new buildings. The second one is interpreting the more than 250 pages of rules and regulations that apply to livestock farmers. 3 is enhancing neighbor relations. And finally, helping them implement best management practices like trees on their farms.
So important to do all that. Lindsay, final word from you about this issue, about diversification, about livestock, about growing soybeans. What do you want farmers to know?
Well, Iowa's an agricultural state. Anything we can do to bring young people into agriculture is good for the state. And I think the foundation for that is animal agriculture.
Anything to add, Dave, to that?
I fully agree with that, and we really appreciate the relationship that we've been able to have with soybean as we work on some of our production research. So we are working together. We understand that we both need each other.
A lot of networking, a lot of collaboration going on. It's epitomized through the relationships as well as through the good work of the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. So despite some of those challenges, the future does indeed look bright for both the livestock and the soybean farmer. And with that, we'll need to leave our conversation there. Thank you to our panelists, Brian, Dave, and Lindsay. Also to the Machine Shed Restaurant here in Urbandale for hosting this timely and informative conversation, and for the wonderful, wow, those cinnamon rolls and the bacon will have us coming back, that's for sure. For continuous coverage of the livestock and poultry industries and their impact on soybean demand and prices, and all the news affecting the soybean industry, go to iasoybeans.com. And for more information, don't forget about the Coalition to Support Iowa's Farmers. They can be found online at supportfarmers.com. In our next edition of the State of Soy, we welcome the CEOs of the American Soybean Association and United Soybean Board. Ryan Finley and Polly Rulin will join us and provide a national perspective on the state of soy, the issues, challenges, and opportunities impacting an industry they represent and that you care so much about. Until then, the very best to you from the Iowa Soybean Association. Now go make it a great day.